Hello, I'm Jim, and welcome to Rallying in America, the Recce podcast. This podcast is an exploration of a rich history, the stories and memories of those who made and make Rallying in America so great. Enjoy the show. Welcome. This week we are joined by Preston Osborne, who serves as the series manager for the American Rally Association. We begin our conversation by exploring Preston's background, including how he first got involved in the world of rally racing. The discussion also touches on the history of O.D.D. racing, providing additional insight into Preston's journey. Our talk continues with Preston detailing his path to becoming the series director for the ARA. He shares the experiences and decisions that led to his current role within the organization. The primary focus of our discussion centers on the American Rally Association itself, its recent growth, and future prospects. We cover a wide range of topics. Enjoy. Preston, appreciate you coming on and chatting with us today on the podcast.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me, Jim. It's I know we've been trying for a little while to get this together, so maybe took longer than both of us wanted, but here we are.
That's okay. We're both busy, so you're probably more busy than I am. So
lot irons in the fires these days, but I'm sure we'll talk about it.
Yeah. So I like to ask my guests, kind of go way back, and how did you first get into motorsports? You know, was your family into cars and motorsports and so on?
Yeah, actually, I don't really have anyone in my family that's involved with motorsport, or I would say even really that interested in cars. You know, other than dad and grandpa like cool cars, but that didn't really translate much into anything. You know, it wasn't part of everyday life, if you will. So I'm actually, interestingly, I got involved in motorsports from video games. So I'm kind of that generation where, you know, grew up playing Gran Turismo and later playing Forza. Heck, even Mario Kart back in the day, taught me the basics of racing. And so for rally specifically, that gave me kind of a passive interest in cars, let's say. Became more aware of brands and different types of vehicles. And then I got my first kind of rally experience, if you will, kind of in the Colin McRae rally games and the Dirt franchise. And I thought it was really cool. That is a car sideways, dust kicking up, anti-lag, all that fun stuff. Obviously we're all involved in rally because of how cool it is. And so I saw it in a video game form. And then kind of a very quick overview as I got involved with a local car club here in Colorado. So I went to CU Boulder, and me and my best friend were basically involved and ultimately ended up running the CU Car Club and put on a car show, and so got much more exposure to cars that way. At one point we actually funny, we had, I think it ended up being the second largest car show in Colorado.
Oh wow.
The only one we were behind was, there's a radio station out here that does like a massive one, but at our peak we were at like 1,200 cars at our annual car show. So really big, and that's actually how I got involved with organizing events. And then got involved with the rally cross community out here, and eventually kind of worked my way up into stage rally. So the first stage rally I kind of ever did was actually a friend of mine who I worked with, Andy Kingsley, who now does Pikes Peak and some other type of more tarmac style racing. He was sleeping on my couch at the time, so he had some extra budget, let's say, maybe from sleeping on my couch, I'm not sure, to buy a rally car, and it was a dirt cheap. I think we paid all of $3,000 for it, quote unquote, ready to race. All cars are ready to race, right?
Oh yeah.
And he has a 91 Honda Civic hatch. and it was from Tommy Kilpatrick, who was very involved with Rallycross here in Colorado,
Mm.
and we raced that car for a few years, built up his STI, and then raced that, and eventually worked my way up with a couple of different drivers and got involved with O.D.D.
Oh, okay. So, tell us about O.D.D. For one, it spells odd, but what does O.D.D. stand for? And
Now, the real question is, do you know what it stands for, Jim? This may predate your times.
oh, I don't. Perhaps I don't offhand.
So,
I
so
didn't do enough
ODD,
homework, evidently.
no worries. It's obviously odd racing or ODD racing
Yeah.
was a fun moniker, but it actually stood for On Dad's Dime.
Oh,
Because
yes.
Cameron Steely, the driver, his dad supported him from the very beginning. They went to Team O'Neill together
Yeah.
when he was getting started in rally, and decided, hey, this is a lot of fun for us to do together. So kind of formed a little team
Hmm.
and named it On Dad's Dime, because ultimately it was On Dad's Dime,
Perfect.
and that was before I got involved, but yeah, so they're based in Colorado, and ended up meeting them just at races. Again, I
Yeah.
was still racing with my buddy Andy, and we actually had, gosh, was it? Well, we crewed next to each other at 100 Acre Wood. This must
Hmm.
have been 2011. And so we met Rod, who's Cam's dad, and just befriended them. Our crew guy Jay Huffner, who's my best friend,
Hmm.
picked a spot next to him because he saw they had a Colorado flag on the side of their truck.
Oh,
So it was like,
excellent.
hey, we're from Colorado, and so crewed next to them, got to know them. Oregon Trail was the next race we did next to them, and we blew up a transmission on the old Ketchum
Oh,
stage,
oh,
with putting a rock through the case. Actually, is how that I
ouch.
say broke. It really broke,
Yeah.
and Cam actually rolled after a finish line.
Oh no.
So we were both having a late night that night, and got to know each other much better. So
Oh, excellent.
so just got familiar with them. We saw them at all the races, and ultimately ended up co-driving for Cam at a couple of regional events,
Yeah.
and then we did a couple of national kind of tours, if you will,
Hmm.
and had some success, which was a lot of fun, and won the two-wheel drive championship a couple of years in a Fiesta
Oh,
ST
nice. Yeah.
that we kind of adapted some of the. Back then it was the R2 parts, now it'd be like a Rally 4 car.
Okay.
We took some parts from that, and Ed McNelly, who was our crew chief at the time, kind of designed some other components, and so we had this kind of hybrid of FIA parts, that we brought in from overseas versus stuff that we had developed in house, and so
Oh,
that's what we
okay.
raced
Cool.
in two-wheel drive. So, and then the program expanded, rental cars and customer cars and
Hmm.
car builds. I'm sure you're aware of Roberto Iglesias.
Yeah.
So his Fiesta Lobo, we built at O.D.D. And we've still got some of our cars out there being raced. So
Oh, excellent. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
So, how many years has it been that you were involved with ODD, and that before you became series director in 2021? How many years do you think?
Yeah, so I think I joined up with Cam and his dad probably around 2013,
Okay.
give or take. Again, I had done a couple of just one-off races for them just because they need a co-driver, and Cam and I got along well, and so I was with them for about 8 years. And for the last three of it, I was full time with ODD. Again, we had customer cars we were supporting,
Yeah.
rental cars, so on and so forth. So, with any small business, I wore a lot of hats.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It was operations and co-driving and team managing, organizing the shop,
Mm.
customer service, kind of a bit
Yeah.
of everything.
Right.
So I think transferring from that role,
Yeah.
into the series role. So I technically joined with the series in 2020.
Okay.
So kind of the end of that season. I started talking with USAC and Doug Shepard, who at the time was the series manager,
Oh, okay.
early 2020, kind of pre all of the COVID stuff. And we had kind of started having some conversations, and then COVID hit,
Yeah.
and everything ground to a stop.
Okay. Yeah.
Race shop included. We had
Can
some
imagine.
long-term
Yeah.
projects we're working on, but
Yeah.
actually, I look back on it, and it's probably kind of almost my working interview was they started talking about, okay, well, how do we come out of COVID? If there's any motorsport that's well equipped to operate in COVID times, it's rally.
Oh
It's
yeah.
you
Absolutely.
have your own bubble, if you will. You're a
Yeah.
driver, co-driver, and your crew. But otherwise, your interaction with everyone else is fairly
Hmm.
limited. And so they had sent over a set of rules that they were going to operate under, kind of the COVID regulations.
Yeah.
I didn't think they were very good. And so I took it upon myself and said, hey, if I was going to write these regulations or these kind of operating procedures,
Yeah.
here's how I would do it, and spent some time, drafted something up, sent it over, uh, and really actually didn't hear anything after that. And then Southern Ohio, in June, so that was the first race back after we stopped
Hmm.
for COVID. The regulations came out, and I was like, "Wow, those look pretty familiar."
Oh,
And so
that's
I was like,
funny.
I guess you did like those
You made an
regulations, and
impression,
I,
obviously.
I guess so. And sure enough, my phone rang, and it was Jason Smith, who at the time was vice president of USAC's, now president of USAC, and he said, "Hey, are you going to be at Ohio? You want to have a chat?" And
Yeah.
kind of the rest is history. So I finished out the 2020 season with a couple of different drivers because Cam wasn't racing that year, and then officially stepped into the role at the start of 21.
Oh, excellent. And here we are in 2026.
Here we are, 5 years later.
That's right. So, how healthy do you think rallying in America is right now? And, you know, how much growth have you seen since you first took that role with the ARA?
Yeah, there's a couple of different perspectives on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's when you look at just raw numbers, let's just say entry numbers. A lot of people point to the late 90s, early 2000s, where the barrier of entry, let's say, was really, really low. And you would have 120, 130, 140 cars at these events,
Mm.
but people were basically running near stock vehicles at that point, and very little safety equipment. So,
Oh, okay.
um, a lot of people go, oh, we're at our big nationals these last couple of years, we're getting 80 plus entries, which I think is fantastic, and an increase with what we've seen in the past
Right,
decade.
right.
But people like to kind of point to the good old days, right? And
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's always going to be a balance of, we want the barrier of entry as low as possible, but we also want to keep everyone safe, and
Right.
that's teams and spectators, crews, volunteers, whatever. But I think rally's on an upswing. It always ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
With us being this blend of professional, amateur, and hobbyist racers, a lot of people are spending their disposable income, or let's say their fun money,
Yeah.
on rallying. So when the economy's down, we see a bit of a dip, and when the economy's up, we
Yeah.
see a bit of a boom. It was interesting the first couple years after COVID. So kind of my first couple years in this position in 21 and 22, we saw a pretty significant increase in the number of entries.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it was like 25% or so from the previous couple of years. And we ended up chalking that up to a lot of people finished cars because they had time to finish cars
Oh,
that
okay.
that were
Yeah.
maybe
Okay.
sitting in the garage, and they hadn't really had a whole lot of extra time, but suddenly they're at
Yeah.
home, a lot of stuff was
Yeah.
shut down. And so I remember talking to Doug Nagy, our technical director, at one point, and we had issued a bunch of new logbooks, in those couple of years for new cars,
Oh, excellent.
more than we would see in a typical year. So we know we saw this huge influx in 21, 22, with a lot of new competitors, and I think we're kind of on the tail end of riding that wave.
Yeah.
We were pretty much flat last year for entries compared to 2024, which was actually good because I had us projected at about 5 to 10% down.
Okay.
And I'm expecting maybe a small downturn this year in the overall number of entries. But I
Okay.
think the big increase and the big kind of bright future that we have in front of us is us now working on promoting the sport.
Hmm.
We haven't had a true promoter or a true group promoting the sport, maybe ever to the extent that
Okay.
we're seeing now. I think Rally America certainly was trying to do quite a bit on the promotion side, which, they had some wins and they had some losses.
Right.
But to have a dedicated group like this that is actually separate, but working with the sporting side, it's the first time we've ever seen that.
Yeah.
And so with that, last year was our first year, kind of creating this group with Lance Smith,
Right.
obviously kind of guiding the ship, and then myself and Marty Nagy, the business manager, kind of doing the day-to-day operations and some of the strategic planning. But we're already seeing payoffs for that going into the 26th season.
Oh, awesome. We'll be right back. Power up your ride. Daily driver, bike, or track beast with Melee Design Firm. Since 2018, Melee has been the go-to source for high-performance battery mounts and power solutions trusted by enthusiasts and professionals alike. Whether you're carving corners on the weekend, commuting to work, or chasing podiums, they have the gear to keep you powered and ready. Their lightweight universal battery mounts are engineered for performance, crafted with precision, and designed to handle whatever you throw their way. They don't just make and sell parts. They build confidence under the hood. Rugged, industrial, functional. That's the Melee difference. Join thousands of satisfied drivers who refuse to settle for stock. Upgrade your battery game today. Now back to the show. Now, for myself, being a podcaster and doing this work with the archive and that, have you seen an uptick in things like that? Podcasts and maybe more photographers or more media people getting out there? Or
the big shift that we've seen is, we've always had this very dedicated group of rallies. That's how I got involved in rally, right?
Yeah,
It was the best sport that no one's heard of in the U.S. and so all of us that have been kind of keeping rally afloat, if you will, are the people that are extremely dedicated, extremely passionate, and always going to be involved in trying to grow the sport.
Yeah.
The change that I've seen in the last year was we've had more road and track articles. There's a Sports Illustrated article about rally. So when we talk about the more, let's say, kind of mainstream and traditional automotive or even non-automotive news, picking up rally stories, that's a huge step.
Yeah.
Obviously we're very early on in that happening and seeing the, let's say, more tangible results from it. But rally is much more in the mainstream than it ever has been before. And I say that a little tongue in cheek. It's still not in the mainstream, but it's more in the mainstream than it's been in a long time.
Okay, excellent. So want to touch base. There's a beginning of every new season, you see a lot of people chatting online and speculating this, anticipating that. So it can be a tough thing to manage, but
it's fun to watch, though.
Yeah. So, there's a lot happening this year. You have, I have my notes here. You have the Stellantis Cup. You have Toyota entering some cars there. You have JRD Motorsports entering some cars. You have this new Striker Challenge.
Yep.
And it's pretty exciting. Can you touch base on any of those and fill us in a little bit?
It's kind of the long-term plan of what we're looking at on the promoter side from let's say who gets involved on the entry side is we never want to lose sight of having grassroots competitors involved.
Yeah.
Again, like I said earlier, that is the wonderful thing about rally, and especially rally in the US, is you get to race next to your heroes. The guy that built his car in the garage for a few $1,000, him and his buddies sleeping in a tent. That's how I got started.
There you go. Eating beans.
All the way. Yeah, exactly. Right? Exactly. I found sleeping in an enclosed trailer is not any more comfortable than sleeping in a tent. It's that juxtaposition of those entry level competitors all the way up to your professionals is what's wonderful. So as we're
Yeah.
growing the sport, kind of our priorities, if you will, for these different groups of people is different. What the professional teams want is media coverage
Mm-hmm.
and VIP experiences and catering
Oh
and
yeah.
all of those things are either in the works or on the horizon.
Yeah.
Whereas the grassroots teams, they want low barrier of entry. They want, as many events as feasible
Yeah.
within a small region. And so we're kind of attacking this growth in different areas. And, the ones you mentioned, Stellantis, Toyota, JRD, Stryker, we'll talk about them here in a second. Those are what we're talking about growing at the top of the sport.
Yeah.
And, I'm not a believer in trickle down economics, but
Yeah.
to a certain extent, having bigger companies and OEs and entities involved gives us more resources to bring things like RallySafe, which is a
Mm-hmm.
very, very expensive, software and hardware that would not be feasible without us able to offset a significant amount of the
Oh,
cost
I see. Okay.
to our other competitors and ultimately to our events. And so, the changes that we've seen over the last couple of years to have a factory-backed program like Stellantis
Yeah.
and that cup to be running in North America, here and up in Canada, I think really speaks to the growth and the potential of rally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's very few motorsports left that have as much relevance to OE cars as we do. We
Yeah.
are still, the FIA is kind of steering away from it a little bit, but we are still largely a production-based car at all levels. Obviously, the
Yeah.
open class cars have a lot of changes. The limited cars have less changes, but the core of Rally is still a production-based car,
Mm.
and Stellantis sees the advantage of that,
Yeah.
to be able to bring the cup over here and the prizes that they're able to give and support the drivers that are going to be in that program. I don't know if you saw the prize, basically the grand prize for the cup. It's a Rally 3 or Rally 2 drive.
Yeah. That's huge.
It's a significant prize.
Yeah.
That's something that I could never offer. We don't
Oh
have
yeah.
that kind of money, but that's what these programs can bring in, right? And
Yeah.
and we talk about kind of this ladder of how to get involved in rally, and obviously it's affordable from a professional motorsport standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still expensive.
Yeah.
It's tens of thousands of dollars to be able to run those cars for a number of
Yeah.
events. But the opportunity is huge if it's something that you're seriously looking to
Right.
do. The Toyota program, we've been trying to get them involved for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
The thing we always joke about within the ARA team is we see all of these OE companies have rally specials, right? But none
Yeah.
of them are rallying.
True.
Ford's got their Mach-E rally, and Toyota's obviously, I guess they race overseas, but have had the Yaris and the Corolla.
Yeah.
Subaru's involved here. They've obviously got a rally focused program. So to see Toyota finally see the value in coming and racing in the US, again, I think really to your original question at the start of this
Yeah.
is kind of where is rally right now?
Yeah.
These are a big sign that rally is growing in the US.
Mm-hmm.
It is a more marketable, sport, and there's benefits that can be seen for everyone to get involved from top to the bottom.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. There
So
a lot of exciting things. Yeah.
yeah, and the JRD concept is very, very interesting. So the reality is it's still very difficult to bring an FIA car, let's call it a Rally
Yeah.
2, 3, 4, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
over to the US. And that's something that we're looking to solve, but
Yeah.
it requires government support, which if you know anything about government, they don't like to
Uh,
move very quickly.
it's true.
So the benefit of having someone like Lance involved is he adds legitimacy because he is a well-respected professional businessmen, heavily involved in a couple of different states, and we now have a foothold in Kentucky
Right.
with support from Eric Hubbard and all the doors that he's opened for us to start to have these conversations. There's a law in Kentucky now that you can register basically specialty vehicles. One of those very specific is basically a rally car.
Right.
That you can register a rally car in Kentucky without really any hoops to jump through.
Yep.
It's limited use, but what you do with your car outside of the races is less of my business. And so the first thing we need to do is get support of a state, and now we need to start working on the federal side of things for importation. So that's going to be a process. So one of the challenges we have is we want that level of competition, right? We kind of have identified that Rally 2 is the top level performance that we want to see in the U.S. We slowed down the open cars in the last few years. We added some weights and decreased the restrictor size. So we've made some steps to slow those cars with the intention of bringing them towards Rally 2.
Okay, gotcha.
But it's still hard to bring one in. So JRD came to us with a concept, and it was very, very interesting because they saw the same problem we did, as many others do. But the difference is, rather than saying, "Hey, you just need to fix this," they said, "Well, what if we had the equivalent car built in the U.S. that is utilizing much of the Rally 2 rule set, but here in the US, you don't have to jump through the same importation hoops. You also don't have to jump through the same homologation hoops that you would with a proper FIA car. I don't know if you've ever seen FIA homologation documentation.
A little bit.
Every part number is stamped. Every bolt is identified.
Right.
Every piece on that car is identified. It is tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars to go through that homologation process. And that's just not realistic for what we have here in the US right now. And so we've partnered with JRD to kind of build this concept, let's say, let's see what allowances, or let's see what restrictions we don't necessarily need to put on some components. Again, I don't care what hardware you use to secure the fenders to the body, right? I do care what the fenders look like and what those are made out of. So kind of simplifying the process a little bit, and JRD's really been our guinea pig as we're going through this process. So I did an interview at PRI with them and Marcus Granholm. Marcus is going to be their development driver, and so he's had input on the project thus far. So I don't think we'll see it on the stages in 2026. I know they're targeting doing a fair bit of testing. So really that car will probably debut actually racing in 27. And again, with that, we'll have a rule set that's developed with them and a few other technical partners.
So that adds a little more work for Mike Nagy and the scrutineers, I'm sure, with these changes. But again, as you touched upon earlier, a lot of it is to do with safety, and you've got new vehicles, new cars, and that's going to add to it.
And in competition, right? We always want to have competition in the series, and when you have runaway victors like we've had with Subaru the last couple of years, we've been looking at, they want competition. It doesn't do them a service to race against themselves. But we also don't have multiple factory supported teams right now. So Toyota, of course, is a step in the right direction for that. But having more homebrew options, if you will, to have a car of that performance level that potentially you could put a capable driver in and be able to match. We saw Connor Martell this year in the Skoda in a Rally 2 car trading blows with Brandon. So the potential is there. Now we just need to foster that, have more people either here in the US or coming from overseas. That was a really important thing we had talked with Toyota about as they were developing this program, is we really want a US based driver. They can bring in a European, sure, and have a ton of rally experience, and I'm sure they would wipe the floor with plenty of people. But at the end of the day, the great thing that I hear from Toyota is they want to build and foster this sport as much as anything else, because obviously it's mutually beneficial.
Yeah, right. One thing to touch upon back roads of Appalachia. I got thinking after going to Boone and driving distance home back to Pennsylvania that I hope that people don't so much look at Eastern Kentucky and Backroads Appalachias. Why do they get to do this? Why are they, the opportunity is there. Well, I hope instead that people look at it as Eric and others there are creating a blueprint for other states. Because I'm here in Pennsylvania and there's a lot of abandoned coal fields and everything else. And I keep thinking, man, somebody's got to use what they're doing and use it as a blueprint to kind of open things up for the same kind of opportunities.
Well, and the huge thing that Eric did that he's actually, so we do an annual organizer conference every year where we bring all our organizers together and have kind of an in-person meeting, and it's an all-day networking event as much as it is a just kind of state of the union, if you will, in addition to the contacts we have with him throughout the year. And we actually had Eric speak at one of our meetings a couple of years ago and just said, hey, there's economic opportunity here from a tourism standpoint. And, some of our events were kind of taking the mindset of like, well, don't talk about rally too loudly or else people will know what we're doing and won't let us come. Whereas we've really shifted that approach and said, no, we're doing a ton for the community from, bringing this outrageously fun event and this awesome event to the area. But in addition to that, we're staying in hotels, we're spending money on gas, food, we're filling up all the different restaurants and everything in the areas, and so we actually do economic reporting after every event, and the events have now started to leverage that and have been more comfortable talking to some of the government officials, city, county, state, whatever, to get their buy-in, and in some situations even get funding. I know Ohio is actually now working pretty closely with the Chillicothe Tourism Group.
Okay.
I don't know if it's Chillicothe or the county. I forget offhand. And so they're actually getting some things either covered or funded because they've shown the economic impact that we're bringing to the area. And so with that, it opens doors, right? Colorado is another good example. We haven't really leveraged any money, but we've got basically the keys to that county. I'm involved on the organizer group with that event since it's as home an event as it gets for me based in Colorado.
I just had Rob and Rupert.
Yep. Oh yeah, I listened to it. So I'm chief of controls basically for them. So I work closely with Rob and Rupert.
Excellent.
And obviously I get to wear both hats in those meetings. But the wonderful thing about Rangeley is because they see how much money we've brought into the area just as a regional event. They saw the potential as a national and basically said, what do you need to be a national event? And we pay very, very little for the roads. We pay very little for any of the services we use in town. And so that's just a huge benefit of showing them that potential of these events. And that's really what Eric's shown. And again, now that we're working with our events with kind of that directive and that understanding, it's really opened doors to some different assets, whether they're roads, locations for service, facilities, whatever it is, that maybe we wouldn't have had 5 years ago.
Yeah, excellent. So this season, from the ARA and having that promotion focus, will we see any more, say, live feeds or YouTube growth for the ARA in particular?
Yeah, that's the plan. Really, for year one, our goal was to not make huge changes, right? We thought from an operation standpoint, the sport was healthy. They're well-organized events, well-operated, had just really done a poor job of promoting, and certainly myself and ARA pre-promoter group own some of that. I didn't have a marketing budget. To
Yeah.
be frank, my marketing budget for 21 to 24 was $0.
Okay.
So
There you have it. Yeah.
so now it's much larger. Well, I can't say much larger. It's larger than zero.
Right. There you go.
Yeah. So for us, it was kind of do no harm, if you will. It
Yeah.
was okay. Let's take a step back. Lance spent a lot of time talking to organizers and just said, hey, you guys are kind of our first customers, right? Ultimately, we're the sanctioning body and we're the promoter, but
Yeah.
you guys are kind of the boots on the ground putting on the events. So how can we better support you? And finances are a big part of it. Obviously, support. I've talked about like the economic impact reporting and such we've done, but money was a big one. And
Yeah.
so again, ARA is not flush with cash, and so as much as I'd love to hand out buckets of money to anyone, I'm still looking for the buckets of money.
Right. I
So
get
so
it.
instead, we've done a grant program which went directly to events, and that was,
Yeah.
some benefactors that basically said, "Hey, we love Rally, we want to see it succeed," and so that was money going directly to events. There's no
Yeah.
strings attached. They didn't have, it wasn't a sponsorship. It was literally just grants, and so we gave out. I think the number ended up being about $40,000 last year.
Okay. Excellent.
That we gave to events to make sure that they were stable.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, as we've increased our marketing for the sport through social media, our traditional media presence, again through print media and things like that,
Yeah.
magazines, we're getting a lot more interest for sponsors, and they're trying to dip their toe into the sport. And so there's actually three sponsors we're working with right now that we said,
Mm-hmm.
hey, rather than come in on a series level with
Yeah.
maybe what would be at the end of the day a small series program, why don't we have you as a title sponsor of an event? And so we're trying
Ah.
to
Okay.
to
Excellent.
leverage these sponsors that are coming in to go directly to the
Mm-hmm.
events so that we can get them some more funding and a bit more support and be a bit more stable financially. Because, I think those in the know from an organizer standpoint understand that the head organizer, so typically your chairman
Yeah.
or your clerk of the course, are financially on the hook for the events. If they're short money, that has to come from somewhere. Some of our longer term events, Snowdrift, LSPR, 100 Acre Wood, those types of events have, maybe a bit of money in the bank just so they can have lean years, but
Got
not
it.
all events do. And so if they have a bad year, there's a real chance of that going away. And so our
Mm.
our first priority is making sure our events are supported.
Yeah. Okay. So there are many factors that you have to look at. The whole
Yeah, there
whole
are. I,
picture.
I
There
I
are a
know
lot of.
there's been some competitors that were hoping there'd be a lot more tangible benefits for them directly, let's say.
Yeah. Right.
But for us, if there's no events, there's no competitors.
Right.
And so how can we support those events? And even though I say that, we've brought in a number of new contingency programs to support competitors.
Mm-hmm.
Contingency programs, we collect very little to no money for those, because really they're geared towards giving back to the competitors and the community. We've got four different tire brands involved now, going
Yeah.
from one a couple of years ago. Pirelli did the Privateer Cup this past year. Sean Donnelly got a $5,000 check at the end of the season, for being the top finishing privateer.
Nice.
We increased the Subaru Money payout last year. Went from being just an entry discount to we gave
Mm-hmm.
out, I think is ended up being about $30,000 in prize money.
Yeah.
So these again are things that we're doing to try and get money directly back to competitors, directly back to events, because ultimately we know it takes money to do all this for everyone, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. So, what can you tell us about the training facility that's going in Eastern
Yeah, so
Kentucky?
So it's very early on for that.
Okay.
We announced that we have some amount of land, basically through that organization with Back Roads of Appalachia, but think of us as a tenant within that kind of larger facility. So long term, we look at it as an opportunity to have a physical site, potentially as the home of ARA, but to give training opportunities for
Yeah.
volunteers, for event organizers, and potentially even competitors. We by no means want to have a rally school or anything like that. That's not the intention there.
Yeah.
But if we have a testing facility, then our competitors could take advantage of that. So we're still defining exactly what that's going to look like, but really the priority is back to that. How can we support the event organizers, and volunteer training, recruitment, retention is a big one. And so with that, we're actually working behind the scenes with a number of our organizers on how we're going to better support them and their volunteers. Again, it's three words. It's recruit, train, and retain. How can we bring more volunteers into the sport, make sure that they're trained up so that they're confident to go to the events and volunteer at those events,
Yeah.
and then make sure that they're appreciated and that they feel like they're welcome, so that they come back to, either the event next year or maybe head out to other events.
Oh, excellent. Yeah,
Yeah,
because I was gonna.
and I was gonna say, and that's still leveraging our partnerships, right? It's we
Right,
have
right.
AO Coolers, who's a kind of outdoor company based actually in Southern California that has been supporting our series for the last year. And they didn't come in with any money, which is fine, because what we were able to get with them is a bunch of product. And so each event, we actually gave quite a bit of product to the organizers and said, hey, coolers and water bottles and mugs
Hmm.
and things like that, and said, hey, these are for you guys. You can give them to key volunteers. You can do raffles to give them away. However you think you can best leverage this, additional swag, let's
Yeah,
say,
right.
to support your volunteers. It's up to you. Subaru had donated some swag for different events. So now it's really us turning to our partners with the series and saying, okay, we're still building up the sport, and with that, hopefully we can get some additional funding. But in the meantime, let's do these smaller but meaningful benefits for volunteers and for events.
Excellent. So, for a volunteer, what's the best place for someone to start? Like, where on your website, where can they go? And
Yeah, so we do have a volunteer page on our website.
hmm.
The information is fairly basic right now, as far as just the best way to get in touch with the different events, the different softwares that they use. Because we talked about kind of centralizing some of the training.
Yeah,
That's still a work in progress, and so we're actually going to have hopefully some announcements around that here in the next few months, but not quite ready to talk about it yet.
yeah, that's fine.
But with that, the events themselves are doing most of the training and have the information. We have worked with the events, and so the information that they have on their websites are much better than they have been in years past. And so really my recommendation would be go to the volunteer page on our website, look for an event in your area or an event that you're interested in
Yeah.
volunteering in, and they'll have more specific volunteer information for that event on their website.
Hmm. And it's a good thing to do volunteering if you want to ever become like a co-driver or driver or just get introduced to the sport. It's
Yeah, that's
uh,
the great thing about getting involved on the volunteer side first,
yeah,
is you can come in with no experience. There's no expectation that you know what rally is or how it works or anything like that.
yeah.
We have basic level positions that will give you the training that you need. And you'll hear it said a lot, but typically it's going to be the best seat in the house, right?
Oh yeah.
The nice thing is the basic level volunteer is usually going to be a road marshal, which means you're standing at an intersection or a junction somewhere, keeping the road secure so people can't get on the road, but also means you get to see the rally cars up close,
Oh
spraying
yeah.
some gravel. So, but yeah, for a new competitor, you'll hear it said pretty often. The best way to start and get your feet wet, if you will, is to go volunteer, because you get to see a little bit behind the scenes.
Hmm.
Something that we hear very frequently is rally is logistically challenging to get involved with.
Yeah.
All motorsports expensive, and rally is at an entry level about the same price as lemons to get involved,
Yeah.
but it's a lot more complicated. And so volunteering gets you a lower pressure way to see how the schedule works, see the different locations, and so if you can volunteer your time, it's a good way to get your feet wet. And something that is also very beneficial is it's good networking.
Yeah.
Rally, Jim, as you've learned, we're a small group, right?
Oh yeah. It's a great
And
community.
yeah, and so getting into the community, meeting some of those people, making connections, you're always going to find someone that'll be happy to answer questions,
Yep.
help wrench on your car, whatever the case is. We take care of our own. So
Yep. Excellent. Well, Preston, thank you so much for taking your evening or afternoon rather and coming on and chatting and um, clarifying some things too that
Yeah.
I had questions with, and really looking forward to this season. And I think it's gonna be a fun one to watch and keep
Yeah,
track of.
we're 30 days out from I don't know when this will be released, but we're 30 days out from the first national event. Our schedule's always I chuckle because our first 2026 events technically have already happened.
True,
In
yeah.
the Ridge Rally and the Maji. We might
Hmm.
make changes to that here in the next year or two, just so it's a bit easier. But for us, we shifted that schedule around so that our 25 season ended in November, which means we shipped out trophies in December. So
Yeah.
most of our winners at this point of our championship, whether that's regional or national, have gotten their trophies
Yeah.
and able to display them. Where when I first got involved, I think we were sending trophies out in like March.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Every year I've strived to get that out earlier and earlier, and Marnie Nagy did an amazing job the last couple of years to get them out very quickly.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I'm seeing a lot of the social media posts showing up with photos of the trophies. So
Well, one of the number one questions I got when I was competing was like, "Oh, how much money do you get when you win?" It's like, "Oh no, I just get I just get something like this.
yep.
There's no money that I get." So it's very important to make sure that you get those
Oh,
trophies and they're proud of them, rightfully so.
yeah. Well, it's funny you mention that because in college I had a professor who was an ultra marathon runner. I remember someone asked him how much money do you make, when you win a ultra marathon. He goes, "No, but I get these really cool belt buckles." For some reason,
Yeah,
for a
I've got
long time,
quite
I think
quite
they
a
were
few of
getting
those
belt
hanging up over
buckles.
there too. Yeah, that's too funny.
And he
Yeah,
was so proud of those belt buckles too.
but
So,
that's what it is,
yeah,
right? It's and what I really love about rally
yeah,
is again that blend of the grassroots all the way up to the professional. And I remember and even still when I compete in rally, it's as much about the adventure as it is anything else.
yeah,
And it's the group of people and it's the group of friends that you get to see at every event. I've got lifelong friends from
yeah.
rally that I wouldn't have met otherwise. I talked about my first driver, Andy Kingsley.
Hmm.
I was actually texting with him today. I
Yeah,
see him maybe once or twice a year, but still talk to him fairly frequently. So
yeah. Excellent. Well, thanks again, Preston. Appreciate it. And I'll be back in touch soon. And
yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it and glad we could take the time.
yeah, definitely. All right. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, thanks so much. You too.
Take care. Bye.
Bye bye.
If you'd like to be on the podcast, you can email me, jim@jimboothdesigns.com, or message me through Facebook at Rallying in America, the Recce Podcast, or Instagram, rallying_in_America. Special thanks to Brady Instruments, pro-grade, handmade, professional fuel hydrometers. Visit bradyinstruments.com for all of your fuel testing needs. Thanks to Toontank and the artist Nuclear Wave for the podcast theme music.